I keep seeing this statement thrown around that the sequel trilogy has ruined the heroes from the original trilogy. Han, ruined. Leia, ruined. Luke, ruined. I don't agree. The common things I hear most often are Han is a deadbeat dad, Luke is a grumpy asshole who just dies, Leia is a bad mom who flies in space, Han dying was a pointless act and ruined the trilogy, Luke's portrayal is the work of Satan. I'm not sure if I went to go see different movies than these people, but my god. These are not the sentiments I came out with after watching the new Star Wars films. Each one of the legacy characters are extremely important in regards to how they affect the antagonist of the saga, Kylo Ren. Saying Han is a deadbeat dad who died a pointless death is honestly the most superficial take on his character in The Force Awakens and his influence in the sequel trilogy. Rather than Lucasfilm just give us a run-of-the-mill Han 30 years later, the story was brave enough to show us a tense relationship between father and son in a novel way for Star Wars. Even if this did not take up much of the runtime in The Force Awakens, it was very compelling to me. Han and Leia had something very real happen to them. They had a son together after the fall of the Empire. Their son was strong in the Force, and over time, due to outside manipulation via Snoke, their son was pulled to the dark side. It reminded me of parents finding out one of their kids had fallen in with the wrong crowd. It just kind of rang true for real life circumstances, in my opinion. Great people can end up having troubled kids. Now, like any concerned parent would, they decided that the best thing for their son was to send him to Uncle Luke, who could help Ben deal with his demons and his pull to the dark side. In my opinion, this was a good decision, but resulted in the final betrayal in Ben Solo's eyes. As we find out in The Force Awakens, the Dark Agent Kylo Ren is Ben Solo. Kylo Ren has joined the very force that his own mother had been fighting against, and if you ask me, he did this for two reasons. Kylo Ren needs to feel important because he was never made to feel that way by his caregivers. So he emulates his grandfather, a person who he has never met, the great Sith Lord Vader, and follows in his footsteps, essentially recreating the dynamic between Vader and Palpatine. For me, it seems pretty clear that Kylo does this for validation. The other reason I think he is part of the First Order is the typical FU to his parents. He rebelled so violently against his own family, he joined the very group the Resistance was preparing to fight against. When Han Solo finally confronts his son after so much time has passed, it's the first time he has seen the face of Ben as a man. If Han was just this deadbeat, uncaring father, there was no way this scene would have even happened. Han tries his hardest to convince his son to come home, to realize this dance with the dark side is a fruitless endeavor. The pain in both of their faces as they talk, it really hit me. Now we know Kylo Ren stabs Han through the chest with his lightsaber because it's what Snoke requires as a test of his allegiance. And to be honest, I really do think Han knew this probably was going to happen, and he went to confront his son anyway. The last thing Han does after being impaled was stare at his son in the face and touch his skin one last time. You could see Kylo's visible anguish in this moment. Han's death, in my opinion, was the first catalyst in Kylo Ren, Ben Solo's redemption. Taking a look at Leia, the brief time that she and Kylo sensed each other was another moment where Kylo Ren considers his actions as well as what he is doing. He hesitates to kill his own mother after realizing she just wants him to come home. In the novelization, we learn that Leia was not mad at her son. On the contrary, she forgives him the second she senses him in his TIE silencer. At first, Ben Solo is gung-ho on destroying the bridge on the Raddus. That's the first thing he's going for. He knows his mother's gonna be there leading the charge on the ship. But now he proceeds with caution and he actually takes his thumbs off the trigger. It's a really interesting moment to me in the film because of how it lingers on Kylo's TIE silencer. And then, Kylo Ren's squadron ends up taking out the bridge. Kylo even considers stopping the bolts if he wasn't so caught off guard. Leia's forgiveness towards her son, warranted or not, is changing him. And that's not nothing. Now I'd like to read a couple paragraphs from the Last Jedi novelization to sort of hone in this point with Leia and Kylo Ren. For a moment, Kylo let himself recall his parents' worried conversations behind closed doors. The ones they deluded themselves into thinking he wouldn't know about. Conversations about the anger and resentment that had boiled over once again in their son. Conversations in which they talked about him like he wasn't their son, but some kind of monster. They were frightened of him, he realized. And so, they got rid of him, sending him away to his uncle Luke, whose betrayal would prove far worse. But Ben Solo was no more. Kylo had shed his childhood identity, and the pathetic weakness it represented. Han Solo's days of cheating and disappointing people were over. The New Republic was destroyed. And now the Resistance, the last of his mother's causes, would follow it into extinction. The heavy cruiser's bridge was bracketed in Kylo's sights. He glanced at his instruments, verifying that his torpedoes were loaded and armed. His mother was indeed there. He could feel her familiar presence in the Force, and he could sense her determination and focus, along with a deep weariness and sorrow and worry. In italics, Kylo thinks to himself, "It's too late to be sorry, Mother, though you're right to worry." His thumb hovered over the trigger. Even as his senses drank in impressions from the Force, the panic on the bridge ebbed and flowed around the calm focus that was his mother. Her anxiety pulsed in the Force in this last moment before her death, but she wasn't afraid. She was worried for him, this is what he realized. And she wasn't angry. She ached for him to come back to her. Kylo depressed the trigger slightly, not quite enough to fire, and then he lifted his thumb. He couldn't do it. A moment later, Kylo's wingmate fired. Now, lastly, you all probably know my take on Luke Skywalker and The Last Jedi. No, I don't think he was ruined. I found it interesting how they had Kylo's final move towards the dark side be a direct result of Luke considering snuffing him out. And I firmly believe whatever Luke saw was frightening enough to him to warrant an ignited lightsaber. After all, I did say in my previous video that Luke has PTSD from his past experiences, which are the original trilogy. For me, the idea that these three characters are ruined, it just comes off as kind of dumb. From my point of view, every action these characters have on and off screen seem to matter a whole lot, and they add some very much needed nuance to the characters we grew up with. And to finish this off, just because the heroes of our past are now going through hard times doesn't negate the good they did in the galaxy. This just shows that the galaxy is realistic. What comes up must also come down. So thanks everybody for listening in on another video of mine. This is the AT Chat, and if you are new here, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell notification to stay updated on my latest content. AT is signing off.